Welcome, people. Good morning. Happy Thanksgiving. Great day today. We're joining about 30 minutes late to the coverage of the day 2 of the skilling knockout stage. I apologize for the delay, but we won't miss the match deciding portion, the last 3 games. Well, I'm glad to hear that, H. Wilson. And like I said, I wanted to cover this event, and today is the first day that I sort of feasibly can. And Hikaru will have to beat MVL in their matchup today, and then they will move on to the Armageddon playoff. Carlsen beat Giri in yesterday's matchup. Here we have Giri against Carlsen in their first game of the day. So we had another Italian. An Italian stallion. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 1, 2, 3, 4. So Giri is up a pawn. But there's a couple mitigating factors here. Obviously, his kingside pawn structure is completely ruined, which lessens the effect of the extra pawn. I wouldn't be looking at the extra pawn here to evaluate this position. I would be looking more at the king safety, because it's very clear that I think the king safety is what's going to be deciding this game. And it's not clear to me right off the bat whose king is weaker. Both kings are terrible. White's king is directly under fire. Giri's probably going to go bishop e3 here to try to cover it up, at least from the rook. I don't imagine him going king d2, although maybe he will. Bishop e5. Okay, so he takes a slightly more aggressive stance. The downside of this move, thank you, Melancia. The downside of this move is that this bishop is only supported by a pawn on d4, and this pawn on d4 can potentially be undermined with a move such as c5. So Giri, he has to act fast. If he makes a sloppy move like queen c6, trying to trade queens, and Carlsen takes on d4, and because of the pin, he's going to pick up a lot of material. So Giri's got to be extremely careful in this position. Maybe he considers f4, but the problem with that move, well, that yields another huge square for the black queen. This is a critical moment. 2 minutes and a half for Giri to decide what to do. Bishop e5, I'm not sure about. That just seemed maybe a little bit too audacious of a move. Rook c6 is interesting, but I'm not sure exactly what that accomplishes. The funny thing is, black could even go queen f5. And it looks like he walks right into a pin, but the reality is, after queen f6, remember that white's bishop is the one that's pinned. Sorry, walks into a fork, but white's bishop is pinned, and that really hurts Giri here. And I'm not sure he's going to have the chance to move his king away from the pin. It may look like a blunder. Didn't I just say that Magnus has this in store? But then queen takes d5, and Giri picks off the bishop with check. But Magnus does it anyway, so his idea is to go queen d5, queen e6. They're going to bail. This is going to be a draw. They're just going to bail out into an endgame. Now, yes, white is up a pawn in this endgame, but remember, white's got the ruined pawn structure, and really the effect of that is tremendously lessened by this ruined pawn structure. I'm anticipating a draw here. I'm anticipating queen d5, queen e6, and then they're going to have liquidation and a draw. Could Carlsen have gone for... One thing to notice, though. Maybe that's not his idea, because Giri can actually take on e6, and then take here, and then go... This is probably what's going to happen. Carlsen's going to be the one fighting for a draw. Yeah, so Giri's going to take the queen. Carlsen's going to take. Giri's going to take. Now, what's going on here? The bishop on e5 must be protected with f4. Now they take, and at the end of the day, when the smoke is cleared, this is the position I think that's going to appear on the board. Carlsen is now down a full pawn, but Giri has to drop his rook back to a very passive stance. Look at how active black's pieces are. Pawn count is not the only thing that decides the evaluation in an endgame. It's also all about piece activity. So... hopefully. Oh, well, thank you. Aw, that's really sweet. That's really sweet. That's a really sweet command. Alright, you guys are gonna make me blush. Damn, girl. I don't think Carlsen missed it. I think he saw it and he just decided to go for a draw. Aquila is the sweetest. I don't know what Giri's thinking about, because the alternative is to go for this endgame, and clearly Magnus isn't even worse here. I think Giri's trying to figure out what he missed. The answer is nothing. No, he does... What? Girl! He does go for this. I don't get it. I think something was missed here, because as far as I know, this at least presents minuscule chances for white. Here... you have the same exact position. Oh. Okay, so I guess the same position arises There's some weird decisions being made by both players here. I'm not sure exactly what's behind this. C5 in this position. Maybe I'm getting the wrong read on this endgame. But basically, at the end of the day, we got exactly the same type of position that would have arisen from that variation, except white has extra 2 pawns. And yet I still believe that this game is going to end in a draw. Because black's got incredible piece activity. Look at how black's rook ties down white's rook to the defense of the a2 pawn. The king on f5 always threatens to go to f4 and just vacuum up the rest of white's kingside pawns. So it's very hard for Giri to make any kind of substantive progress here. Whoa! Holy smokes! $50, what a morning gift. And I'm thankful, of course, to this community, which I will properly say later. I came across your speedrun series on YouTube and couldn't believe this level of instruction was available for free. Well, thank you so much, Crow, for the $50 dono. That is amazing stuff here. Thank you so much, my man. That is just incredible. Thank you so much. That's awesome. That is just absolutely awesome. All right, so absolutely lovely message indeed. And here we go. So what is Giri doing? Giri is saying, okay, I'm going to give up some of my pawns, but I'm going to try to dislodge this rook from the f5. I think this is going to happen. King b4 seems to make the most sense. Now rook takes f3 is forced. And then what Giri's going to do is make a play on black's a pawn. He's either going to go rook c5 check, but most probably rook to c7 is what we're going to see in the next 3 seconds. We're about to see rook c7. Carlsen's going to play rook takes h3. Do not take this pawn because you lose the rook. Carlsen's going to take here. Carlsen could also consider the move a5 check, which he just played. And the idea is after king takes a5, Magnus doesn't take any of these pawns. He returns to take this pawn because the king is very close to eliminating these other pawns. So Giri's question is, does he take the pawn? Does he go king a4? King a4 seems to be the ambitious attempt. He does end up taking the pawn. Aw, GM Hess is in the chat. But rook takes h7, king g6, and the game ends in the draw. Because the rook has to move, then rook takes f2, and black easily picks off the last remaining pawn. I think Giri's just going to go h4, h5. Yeah, so the game is a draw. Very interesting liquidation there. I'm not sure that Giri... Well, I think that Magnus had everything calculated. I think he was well within... And sorry for the choppiness. That's just how the transmission is coming in. This is a really interesting position, guys. I want to analyze this a little bit. Dana Neidorf, which is MVL specialty. Bishop d3. This is a very interesting move. It's become very popular recently in the Neidorf. And they got this kind of interesting position where Hikaru managed to ruin MVL's pawn structure, and then he went after his pawns. Yeah, he just went after his pawns. MVL, bishop takes a2. That doesn't look like a move you play if you're in good shape. And we got... Oh my goodness. Oh my frickin' goodness. This is unbelievable. Am I seeing a $100 dono from Spunkle? Happy Thanksgiving, my dude. Are you kidding me? Christmas has come early indeed. This is absolutely ridiculous. I've barely started commentating. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Spunkle. Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Absolute poggers level of support this morning. Man, I don't know what to say. That's awesome. That is just awesome stuff. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Why did Hikaru not go b3? It's a great question, actually. Why did Hikaru not trap the bishop Fischer style? Thanks again, Spunkle. That's an incredible level of support. I think the reason is king b8. I don't turn on the analysis bar or the engine, by the way. That's just my rule. By the way, if rook d6 trying to pin the knight to the queen, then queen h3 is the point. You escape with check. Then you move the knight away, and then presumably you go after the bishop. Although this is also not so clear. But I would say maybe you preemptively move the king out of the way so that rook d6 becomes a threat. And I suppose white can move his knight away from e4. But here you can see that MVL starts to develop this initiative, and he starts bossing white's pieces around. So the bishop doesn't tell the whole story. I think that's the reason why Hikaru refrained from this and decided instead to sort of allow black's bishop back, but on the other hand continues the bishop takes h7. Wow, very fearless play here. Thank you, Texas Crane, for the tier 1. And a very complicated game. I'm sure this is worthy of far deeper analysis than I'm subjecting this to. But eventually Hikaru just sent his pawn down black's throat. And there's just no stopping. And now bishop d3 traps the rook on d2. It can't move anywhere. Knight e4 is also a possibility. So, this is, okay, wow, they're staggering these games? What is going on? Why is it so hard to follow this tournament? Am I alone here? It's like some games are starting, some games are not. Okay, so MVL Hikaru, I know, is what people are interested in. We have an Italian here. This is all theory. Okay, so we just got a standard Italian position. Oh, Hikaru had this. Hikaru had this against... Who did he have this against? I can swear I saw him having this against somebody that he lost to. I think it was Magnus. I think Hikaru had this against Magnus in their famous matchup. Okay. So, what do we have here? What's going on in this position? Well, black has a pass pawn, which is a good thing. But very often when you look at a pass pawn in the middle game, you want to look at the square in front of the pass pawn and try to understand, does the opponent have control over that square? Because that is what's called a blockading square. That was introduced by Aaron Nimzovich. And white does have fairly good control, thank you Arden for the 500 bits, of the d4 square. And he's trying to increase that control by kicking black's knight away from f5 so that he can potentially position a knight on d4. But MVL deciding instead to go after black's king side. Now h5 here by Hikaru would keep things closed off. But in that case, I think MVL would eventually want to put a knight on d4, maybe prepare something like e6. So he's immediately facing Hikaru with a challenge here. Does he take the pawn? I don't think that doesn't look good to me because it allows the queen to get very active and attack the knight. So this seems a little bit fishy. He basically offers a queen trade. So if MVL takes it, and now MVL takes, you get an interesting endgame. I think white's better here. He can try to break through with e6. I think white's definitely calling the shots. Black has quite deficient pawn structure. And again, remember that white has control over the square in front of the pass pawn. But Hikaru is very good at defending these kinds of positions. And he rarely loses them. MVL could also play e6 immediately. Maybe that's a little over-ambitious, but I want to open up files for my rooks. My anticipation, in my estimation, he's going to take on h6 and go e6. But we'll see. No eval bar here. That's right. All right, the tracks are. You have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks for the 5 gifted. Enjoy the turkey. So I think if I can try to, become a demon and go into the mind of MVL, I think what he's thinking about is 2 things. Do I take on h6? Number 1. Number 2, do I go e6 and try to open up the e-file for my pieces? The alternative would be something like, I don't know, knight d4. Just bringing the pieces into the game, blockading the pawn, and then bringing the rook into the game. That would also be possible. But e6 just seems to be where the turkey's at. No pun intended. MVL has decided to trade on h6, and he's gone a3. So he's decided now to chip away at the edges rather than mount the frontal assault with e6. He's keeping e6 in his pocket, instead deciding to open up some prospects for the rook on a1. Hikaru could try to close things down with b3, but then that would create the weakness of the b3 pawn. MVL would attack that with rook e3, and the pawn would be lost. It's easy to follow that white just wins the pawn here. So that's not what Hikaru is going to do. What is Hikaru going to do? Is he going to play rook to c2, trying to mount a counterattack against white's pawns? That seems pretty plausible. Is he maybe going to try to sacrifice the pawn on b4, but try to put a band-aid over some of the other weaknesses in his position? Something like knight to c6 comes to mind. A takes b4, and maybe you don't even take the pawn. Maybe you go rook b5. The idea is to keep the a7 square under control so that white doesn't infiltrate with his rook. He goes rook to c2. So he does play a move in that spirit, activating his rook, counterattacking white's pawn. And we'll see how this is handled. By the way, Carlsen Giri is underway. We have a Grunfeld with a double fianchetto. Giri playing e3. A very peaceful move that Giri is obviously huge opening specialist. But against someone like Carlsen, it makes sense to play something a little calmer. Something to hopefully throw Magnus out of his own incredible preparation. That's what these battles revolve around frequently, etc., etc. Now, by the way, MVL has now gone e6, as we kind of discussed. He has played this move. The problem is he's running out of material. Now, what is his idea? if Hikaru just takes on b4 and just says, I'm ignoring everything, because if you take on f7, I'll take back with the rook, and I will defend the knight on e7. MVL could jump to e5. White is no doubt calling the shots here. I don't think White is risking losing the game, even if he's down a pawn. He's got such piece activity. He's not going to be in danger of losing anytime soon. But he might not be in danger of winning the game anytime soon either. Because if he runs out of pawns and Hikaru keeps his pieces protected, well, White might not have enough prospect here to mount any sort of meaningful attempt. Okay, so we're going to keep an eye on this. Carlsen Giri is proceeding along these sort of calm Grunfeld waters. You can see Anish putting his knights on d2 and e2. This kind of resembles a hippo, but with the pawns on d4 and c4. That does not resemble the most ambitious opening setup I've seen. And it's quite insane to see Magnus. I'm not sure what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I borrowed this from a Russian phrase where they say, like, he's not risking losing, but he's also not risking winning. and Giri going, oh, but Carlsen is white. Sorry, I for some reason I confused it. I thought Carlsen was black, so Carlsen is actually playing. This makes more sense. It makes more sense that Magnus would be playing a setup like this because he doesn't need to win today's mini match. He just needs to get a calm position. Giri going h5, so he's stopping any potential attempt at g4. He's keeping the bishop locked in place. My apologies for the confusion. So it's not a hippo, right? It started off as a regular Grunfeld, but then Magnus decided to put his knights on e2 and d2, which is not normal, not necessarily normal in this setup, although it's not bad. Now, the knights have prospects, right? This knight could jump out to f4. This knight could later go on to f3. It's not like these knights are locked in place. Magnus could also try to get some queenside pressure going with b4. But MVL and Nakamura having the most developments right now. Nakamura has decided to take with the king on f7, not the rook. The king fulfills now the same role as the rook. It could also be attacked just like the rook. But king steps away. If you try to open up a discovered attack against the knight, no problem. I just defend it with rook f7. I think MVL had good chances here. It seems to me that these chances are rapidly beginning to slip away from him, unless he can create something in the next move or two. By the way, knight d3, very important detail. Knight d3 meets with rook to e4. If not for this move, black would end up losing either the rook or the knight. And MVL could take and go knight c5, and you know, he has a symbolic advantage here. He wins one of these pawns because he's also threatening a fork, but this is nothing that Hikaru can deal with. So my estimation is that this game will be a draw. Now, Hikaru, if he manages to win today's mini-match, they go to an Armageddon playoff, which is in his favor. He's the better Blitz player. So MVL ideally would like to win this game, given that he's white, particularly because he emerged from the opening in what seemed like a very good position. Back to Levon against Nepo. Levon's knight is making all sorts of jumps. Oh, okay, so Nepo did open up a discovered attack against the knight on d5. He won it, but in return he sacrificed the other knight. And again, look at all of these pins. Now he pins the other knight. Queen to c2. I mean, crazy stuff. Does anybody want to tell me what happens after rook to c8? Why is rook c8 not just winning the knight on c6? There's a little nice detail here that people have to see. Thank you, Brunane, for the prime. Really appreciate it. Knight to e7, of course, yes. And 1-2 attackers and only one defender. So Aronian wins a second exchange. That's not good. What does that mean? That means, well, Nepo could consider a move such as knight to g5, threatening checkmate on h3, but it's less scary than it appears. I think after h4, white opens up a little hole for the king on h2. You could give a check on h3, but that doesn't really do much. Sorry. And, whoa! Holy smokes! Chrome JS10 with 10 gifted subs. This is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Thank you, Chrome JS10, for the 10 gifted subs, and happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, you're very welcome, man, and thank you for the, thank you so much. I am tongue-tied at this level of support. Wow. 10 gifted subs. Enjoy, people. Thank you so much. Yeah, over 3,500, which we crossed yesterday. Just incredible. Yep, thanks for the fat 10 gift subs, Pikachu. But I still maintain that we have to get Pikachu in here. Thank you, Meblovox. Well, okay, so back to the game. If black moves the rook away from d8, then he gives up b4. And by giving up b4, your entire initiative has evaporated, and you don't have enough for the exchange. And black might be losing this. I'm not sure what Nepo really has in store for Aronian here. You can take on c6. He does. That's what he did. But now he's... Okay, so he's trading queens. And basically what this is signaling to me is that he's going to try to hold on in the endgame. There is one really interesting mitigating factor, which is the fact that this rook on c6 is actually trapped. If you look at this rook, it has no squares. So Nepo could have a plan where he just moves his king, saunters over to d7, tries to pick off the trapped rook. But that's why Aronian played rook a1. He's trying to untie the rook by playing bishop a3, forcing the exchange of bishops, and that's the glue that's causing black's position to be together. So bishop a3 is quite possible in this position. I think he's going to play bishop a3, but what Nepo's doing is creating a hole for his own king in order to prepare knight d4. So Aronian plays e3. He's defending the d4 square. Oh, thank you there, Bear Jewel. Okay, and he's going to play bishop a3. Well, on the next move, I was going to say, until Nepo stopped him. But in stopping him, he allows the rook an escape route via c8, which is something that Aronian might use now, or he might use it later. We'll keep an eye on this game. As we talked about, MVL against Nakamura has proceeded exactly in this fashion. Knight d3, rook e4. Now I think MVL is going to acquiesce to the inevitable and take on e4, go knight c5. This game is going to end in a draw quite rapidly. But we're going to see. Okay, so Carlsen has played h3. He's thrown that in there to potentially prepare some g4 ideas, which Giri is going to have to be careful about. Now this is the sort of position which... It might not seem like a lot is going on, but there's a lot of tension that's percolating under the surface. Because both sides are gearing up, no pun intended, gearing up. I'm hilarious. For a potential opening of the center with e5. So something like e5, even in this position, is absolutely possible. The center opens up. The question is always in these positions, who is more prepared for the opening of the center? Is it white or is it black? That's a question that both players have to evaluate very carefully. Giri does have a lot more time, which tells me that he's prepared for this particular setup. He's chosen where to put his pieces well. Vashia Lagrave against Nakamura is still a dead draw. Just knight and rook and 2 against knight and rook and 2, with no advantage now for either side. This is going to be agreed a draw, I'm pretty sure. And Carlsen Giri. I like what Anish is doing here, at least preliminarily. He's building up this big time advantage. And he still hasn't decided to open up the center. But what he has done is planted a bishop on this very weak square that white has on b4. So how does Carlsen now manage this position? I think something like knight f3 comes to mind. Maybe you stop e5 permanently, but then you give up the e4 square. What should also be pointed out here is this bishop on f5. That ain't going nowhere, girl. So you got to be a little bit careful about accidentally not allowing g4, which would trap the bishop. Thank you, GGO. good name for the prime. Is c5 a move? C5 you've got to be very careful about. I assume you mean from black side. Well, then that takes on c5. Well, it's not that it's a mess. It's just that, yeah, he's played c5. Oh, for white side, he does play c5. Good job, H. Wolfson. Well, it's not that it's a mess. Again, there's two factors I would point to here that make this position, that maybe give this position some clarity. The first is black going to play e5 and open up the center? And which side is more prepared for that? The second is this bishop on f5. Is it going to come back to haunt black or not? Is white going to be able at some timely moment to play g4 and potentially trap the bishop? Now that's why Carlsen plays knight f3. He's stopping Giri from playing e5. And yeah, so c5 for white. Ryan says he doesn't like... Well, I mean, he closes up the queen side. Now the bishop on b4 is also stranded. Now it can't be trapped because it's protected by a pawn and there's no white pawn that could possibly attack it at any point in the game. Even mathematically. Yeah, bullet right now, yeah. But that's not necessarily a good thing. Maybe Giri plays b6 and tries to give this bishop a passage back. We'll see. We will see. I need to take a 10 to 15 second break, guys. just to flush out my mouth, but I'll be right back. And we will continue monitoring. This is, again, those of you just joining us, this is the quarterfinals of the Skilling Invitational. It's called the Open, but it's actually not an Open at all because it's featuring the greatest players in the world, of course, as you can see. The winner, so basically each semifinal matchup consists of 2 days of games. There's no easy way to explain this because it's pretty darn confusing. Basically, they play 4 games a day, and then the winner of each mini matchup advances. So if it's 1-1, one person won the first day's matchup, other person won the second. They play an Armageddon to determine who advances to the semis. In any case, 95. So what Giri has managed to trade his problematic bishop, but now the other bishop is also a problem because it can't go back. So this is a really interesting position. We'll keep an eye on this. So we had a transformation, a bunch of trades, and Carlsen mopped up that bishop. And Magnus is definitely better here. So he's emerged victorious, I think, from... And we talked about this, right? The position is going to transform in some way. And in such positions, the way to follow these positions is always to ask yourself, okay, who benefits from the transformation? Here it's been white. Why? Because look at this beautiful protected pass pawn. Number 1. Okay, fantastic. Number 2, bishop on b2. A lot of people would look at that terrible bishop. Bishop is staring at the pawn. These bishops are often misunderstood. Imagine if this pawn were gone from e5. I would compare this to Wesley So's bishop, which was on b2, right? Terrible bishop. But as soon as he pushed the pawn, this bishop became a game-winning piece. And so these are the kinds of pieces, I talked about this in the speedrun, they have a lot of potential energy, but not a lot of kinetic energy, right? They look bad right now, but the moment that the pawn is gone from e5, this bishop becomes an absolute killer, or shall I say skiller. He'll be skilling it, that's for sure. So the combination of these factors make black's position quite difficult. Not indefensible, but definitely quite difficult. Now, MVL and Nakamura are still playing. Well, MVL has... Well, Hikaru's given up a pawn. It doesn't really matter. I mean, there's so few pieces on the board that it should still be a draw. I mean, knight g5 check, I guess. And then he wins the pawn back. Yeah, because of king g3... Well, rook h3 seems to win the knight, but then king g4 counterattacks black's knight. Check, king e4. Okay, it's going to be a repetition of moves, or is it? MVL is trying to make something happen here, but he's not going to succeed because there's too few pawns remaining on the board, and Hikaru eliminates one more of them. It's time for a Thanksgiving pun. I think we're all ready for it. Carlsen, Giri. Carlsen definitely keeping his foot on the gas pedal here. Giri does have a very nice knight on d5. That's the one thing that's keeping his position together, is the fact that he's got this beautiful knight on an outpost, and the knight is completely unassailable. It can't be attacked by any pawns, can't be attacked by any pieces. It is literally an eternal knight, as they say in Russian. And this is, well, maybe I was a little bit over-optimistic in evaluating Magnus's position. I think white is better here, I have no doubt about that. But Giri has his share of chances here if he can keep his position glued together. The problem is Magnus is so good. People want to know what Magnus is good at. This is what he's good at. Okay, he takes a position where it's clear that he's better, but it's absolutely unclear how to progress. And he makes it look so easy against some of the world's greatest players. Rook c4, bishop c5 comes to mind. You could pile up on this b4 pawn. That seems to be the most obvious plan. Maybe we'll see rook c4 in this position. Followed by, that seems like a Magnus kind of idea. You could also try to twist the knife in by playing bishop c5, bishop d6 first. That bishop would serve 2 purposes. It would just be on an outpost. And h4, very patient. He doesn't do anything yet. He first improves his position. And he forces black to... Well, he's torturing black, right? He's playing very slowly, very methodically. Carlsen, Giri still going on. He has positioned his bishop on d6. And we will check this on table base after the round. I will set this up in table base and I will tell you guys. He might have slipped, but I think he just blundered. I mean, you have to understand in these kinds of time pressures, with that kind of pressure, these kinds of blunders happen all the time. It's not, you know, I'm not trying to scold him for it. It's just hard for me to believe that someone of Radjabov's caliber misses something like that. But it happens. It happens to everybody, obviously. Okay, so Giri sacks a pawn. But in return, he gets a big initiative for his pieces. I'm not sure that that's enough, though. If you play queen b4, knight e2, king h2, I'm not sure where black's going with this, to be honest. I'm absolutely not sure where black is going with this. So, yeah, I think queen takes b4. And it looks like black's initiative begins to evaporate. Yeah, no, I think this is losing. I think that if black doesn't get anything here, then remember, white's got the connected passers. Carlsen didn't play queen b4. He played a5, huh? He's pushing his pawn instead. No, but he wants to push his pawn to a7 as quickly as possible. The intention is completely understandable. But queen d1... maybe Giri goes here and then here, but what does he really want? After a6, I don't really see much going on here for black. Yeah. Knight e4. Knight e4, people are saying. But if a6, what is the idea? I guess knight d2? No, but this is not easy. He's played knight e4. Knight takes g3. No, but how is this perpetual? No, I don't believe that this can be perpetual. This is perpetual? I don't think so. The king escapes, it seems. Knight e4, a6. I think, let's figure out the idea. Maybe he just wants to take and go queen b3. Could it be this? Because after a7, I know it looks like white's pawn is a lot further advanced. But, white's queen needs to get to b7. And by the time that it gets there, black positions his own pawn on b2, and we're going to have simultaneous promotion and a draw. So I think knight takes c5 might be it. I think he might just want to take on c5. Magnus might have screwed this one up. It looks like, from what people are saying, queen b4 is the winning move. And Magnus greedily going after that passed pawn of his, not realizing entirely that he's got other things to worry about here. Knight d2 as well apparently makes a draw, which I believe. Wow. So that's a pretty serious result. If Giri manages to save this, that continues to put him in the running. If he can score one victory, he would equalize... well, he obviously has to win today's matchup. But if he does, that's pretty serious. Now, I want to just be very clear here. I'm sitting here in my armchair, drinking my tea, feeling good, and, you know, excoriating Magnus for not finding the stuff. I mean, these players are putting themselves out there. This isn't like, oh my god, how could Carlsen miss this? It's a completely understandable intention to push his pawn to a7. For God's sakes, the man wants to promote. But, you know, Magnus, insofar as he's had a little bit of insofar as he does have an area where some people have tricked him, and he can be prone to getting tricked sometimes in these kinds of positions. He can get tricked. And I've seen that on a couple of occasions. So he's still the legend, he's still the best, but he can get tricked tactically in some positions. What if Bishop... Okay, so Giri has done it. He's done it. He's found it, and this is going to end in a draw, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, Magnus is definitely overrated. Now, white's got to be a little bit careful. I think Magnus just has to make a draw. He's got to play a7, and he's, I'm sure, not happy with himself here. I think he's realized it. Okay. He's gone a7, yep, and queen a2 is what we're going to see here, I think. And let me pull up the other games in the meantime. Nakamura MVL. And let me set up that position as we see queen b1 check. Not sure if that was strictly necessary. I'm sure it doesn't ruin anything. Queen a2, yeah. So he wants to make sure he's making contact with the pawn on f2. Anish, yeah, he's solid. I mean, gotta give it to him. The man is very solid. He knows how to make draws. And that's no easy matter against someone like Magnus. Okay. Do you enjoy seeing other GMs play? Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy... G4. Magnus, is he entertaining prospects of playing for a win? Has he not just gotten a... What is he doing? What if H takes G4? What is the point of this? Does he want to go H5? He wants this, doesn't he? He wants to get the queen into G5 and then to D8. That is very interesting. I'm not sure about this, but he definitely... This is a typical idea. I've seen this before. No, I've seen this before. Now, what is the way to understand this is this pawn on a7, right? He wants to promote it with tempo. So to do that, he's got to get black's king onto the back rank, deliver a check on d8, and then promote his queen. And in order to do that, he's going to have to break up black's pawn shell around his king. So I think this is his idea. And Giri's got to be careful. If he moves his king up, for example, to try to stop queen g5, then Magnus goes queen e4 check, and again, he achieves the same effect of promoting his pawn before black has promoted his. With a minute and 40 seconds, let me tell you, Giri is peeing his pants here. I mean, when you're facing Magnus and he plays a move like this, you're not celebrating the fact that Magnus is tilted. You're nervous as hell. Giri can also ignore the Soul Endeavor and just play b3. That doesn't seem too stupid either. Takes, and I mean, b2. I mean, that seems to be the most straightforward, but Giri does take on g4. I think h5 is going to follow. It does. And again, the point of this is to break open the defenses surrounding black's king so that white can try to get his queen to a square where it's simultaneously checking the king and controlling the promotion square of white's pawn. White is trying to promote first. I'm sure this is still a draw, but let's see how Giri handles this. Queen e3, I think, is going to follow. I can almost guarantee you're about to see queen e3 on the board. And maybe black needs to... Yep, there we go. And maybe black needs to move his king away. But where does he move it? Right, again, if he moves it to h7, that's a blunder. If he moves it to g6, that's a blunder. Maybe he needs to move it to the back rank just to escape the immediate check. But now he gives this check. And then this check. And again, this is very, very dangerous for black. Because if he allows a promotion, there's going to be hell to pay. Okay. So I hope this is making sense to everybody. Again, it's all about priorities, ladies and gentlemen. You might look at this and say, oh my god, Magnus is giving up these pawns. Why is he doing that? Well, again, the priority for white is to promote his pawn. If that means giving up 3 pawns, so be it. He doesn't care about the pawns here. He cares about giving the king a check so that the promotion square is also covered. And he's giving up anything to make that happen. Giri with 20 seconds. Let's see if he finds the defense. Counting down, queen a5. So the idea of this move. The idea of this move is to open up the f8 square so that the queen will not have the d8 square, which is one of the golden squares, so to speak. That's a square from which the queen is checking the king and covering the promotion square. I think that's a very strong defensive move. I think that's a very strong but Magnus can drop just by giving a bunch of these checks. Because if Giri tries to escape, then queen h8 is going to win. Or if he tries to escape to e7, then queen f6 is going to win. Because he's going to start mopping up the pawns. I actually can predict, guys, that this is how the game is going to end. I predict that Magnus is going to acquiesce to the draw here, go queen h6. And we're going to see Perpetual with king g8, queen g5. It's going to be a draw. And a good effort by Magnus in the end. Finding every last chance, but Giri staying on his heels and finding the key defensive move. Aronian and Nepo has also ended in a draw. There we go. When does Giri object to a draw? Well, here, of course, Giri has no choice, and the game has officially ended in a draw. Whew, what a full round of action. Let's set up the Aronian so position on table base. I'm setting it up in chess base, ladies and gentlemen. This position that's in front of you, I'm setting it up in chess base. And it's white to move. Or sorry, it's black to move. And let's see. Opening up, turning on Stockfish. It is winning. Yeah, it's winning. You guys are right. But Rajabov, the fact remains, had a draw. And the way to win this, I know people are very smart when they're looking at table base, but it is winning. Ah, this is very nice, actually. Would Wesley have seen this idea? I think he probably would have. Yeah, this is winning. So basically the idea is you bring the king up to f4. Remember that as soon as black takes on h3, he allows a check on h5. And if black continues to shuffle, then white just pushes his pawn. And he pushes his pawn, and he pushes his pawn. And then the key move is to play rook to g5. Which simultaneously defends the pawn and cuts the black king off from further advances. So now you go here and the game is over, king f6. Now, I wasn't projecting the chess-based screen. So, very, very nice effort by Wesley, but Rajabov with that key miss. So, let's open up the games from the third. Yep, and MVL Nakamura have already started. So, no rest for the weary. Okay. So, we have, I think, the same line that we had in game 1 of today's matchup, which is this sort of Najdorf with bishop g3. Nakamura shuffling his bishop all over the place. MVL going h5, which is a very typical move in these types of Najdorf positions. He's actually going for some kingside attack with h4. And this is really interesting. I don't know if the opponents are still in their preparation. I'm pretty sure MVL is. MVL, of course, one of the Najdorf specialists of the modern day. He's one of the greatest specialists of the Najdorf probably ever, but particularly in today's era, he's incredibly well prepared. Also, the same goes for the Grunfeld. So, it's not bishop e4. If you notice that the queen is x-raying the knight, so I think the simplest is to play bishop h6, attack the rook, and attack the knight. You always have to watch for the x-rays. You always have to watch for those x-rays because they can open up, they can be the keys to delivering a discovered check. MVL has taken, and that's exactly what's happened. Nakamura has taken, and bishop d3 has been played. Now MVL could take on d5, right? There's no bishop h6, but there's other moves here. You could even go queen to b3. And look at Black's king. Black's king is super weak because MVL has pushed his pawn out to h4. And if this knight leaves, then again, you look at the x-ray. Pawn is immobilized. Crunch. Bishop takes g6. Black's king's position collapses. Rook gonna land on c6. This is a horrible position. And Hikaru just, you can't get these positions against him. This is one of his strengths. When he gets a position like this, where he's just pressuring like this, he just doesn't let you go. I'm anticipating something like rook c6, queen b3. Such easy play here for white on top of everything else. We have a Berlin in the game, Giri Carlsen. Not interesting. Let's check back into the game, Nakamura against MVL. As predicted, total disaster. This is going to be a quick win for Nakamura. MVL is now down in exchange, which he was forced to sacrifice because white was just skewering the hell out of black here on f7. MVL desperation time. MVL desperation time. Looks like it works, guys. So, no, but Hikaru can trade queens here if he wants. He can go bishop g5. More pins. Pins galore. He can just defend the b4 pawn. White is spoiled for choice. This game is all but over. MVL is a great defender, but even for him, yep, Nakamura just says, all right, I'm going to defend the pawn on b4. I'm not going to let you capture it. I'm not going to let you capture it. And white can then smoke out black's rook with rook to a1 on the next move. Yeah, a very strong performance here by Hikaru for sure, who's going to go on to win today's mini-match against MVL, and they are going to go on to an Armageddon. They are going to go on to an Armageddon. But okay, maybe I should do some impressions a little bit. Now here we have a Sicilian. Okay, let me try to do an impression of a player that is playing the game and try to evaluate the position. There is a Blitz first. Well, Armageddon, it's what I call Blitz playoffs, the same thing. Blitz. Sorry, guys. The format is so confusing. Now, here we have sort of like a Sveshnikov type position where white's got control over the d5 square, but black's got mitigating factors here. Black's got queenside pressure, so this is still well within theory. But I think that Wesley has got to be happy with the result of the opening, because the last game, of course, I got a little bit lucky, and I wanted to thank Timur for losing on time. But here after h5, h4, it's not... Well, here for sure, white is slightly better because I have control of the d5 square. But after bishop h3, maybe you want to trade the bishops and then put a knight on d5. But we'll see what Timur plays here. Now the clocks are not working, so let me refresh the screen one more time. I apologize for the technical problems here. But let's go with Giri against Carlsen. Emerson, what do you want? Do you want me to win the game right out of the opening? Is that how you play a smooth game? And Norris says, is that what you want from me? Is that how you play the Berlin defense? Come on. come on. Farm. Bishop f5. All right. I can't really do Magnus, so I'm sorry. That's the one weak spot I have. Now we have a Berlin here. I don't want to cover this game if you guys don't mind. I really don't want to cover this game because it's a Berlin and I hate the Berlin. And we have a donation. $3 from Riven Techno says no, don't worry, Riven Techno. I've been doing impressions for over a year. Because of the community that I have, I think everybody knows I respect the hell out of these people. And I mean that in the truest sense of the word. So we all gotta laugh, we gotta have some fun. And guess what? I invite everybody to make an impression of me. In fact, I've made an impression of myself. So if I'm making fun of myself, I think then it's permitted. But thanks for your concern. I think we'll be fine. All right, guys. Is it okay if I go to sleep to this position? Now it's a Berlin. How do we understand the position? Let's get serious about this. I am supposed to be commentating. So, okay, so let's invite Giri, to describe to us, how exactly, to look at this position. First of all, it reminds me, of a game as Kromnik that I played in Astana in 2000. Now, one of the main sort of things to realize in the Berlin is that pawn e6, is the main idea, in these types of positions, So White has to consider, what happens, if e6 here and okay, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, talk about politics, Vladimir Putin, but after e6, it's not so clear. Yeah, but. Yeah, because I've heard him more in a political context recently, so I can imagine how he says the names of, politicians, but it's harder for me to imagine him talking about chess. Thank you, MCSRP, for the Prime. Sorry, for the Tier 1. But, well, thank you, Gary, for the impression. Now let's... well, my name is Vishanand. Let's take a look at the game after h3, h6. Well, I think by and large, Magnus, he knows how to play these positions, but, I think that he will be able to draw this position. But, okay, after e6, Black is in some trouble here, but Giri with 15 minutes plus, I think, after bg4 and h5, I think, it's definitely improved, but, yeah. I'm pretty pumped at this. Okay, so let's go back to Nakamura MVL. Hikaru continuing his demolition here. He's up in exchange. He's got the passed pawn running up to b5. Now, the material advantage itself is not that vast. MVL is only down in exchange, but with almost no pieces left on the board, this is quite bad. Again, the board is frozen. Okay, here's what I'm going to do, folks. Here's what I'm going to do. Because I'm so sorry about this. I'm quite embarrassed, but I'm not sure why this happens. It's never happened to me before on this scale. For some reason, the screen capture gets messed up when I change to another screen. So I'm not going to use ChessBase. Let me just close ChessBase. I'm not going to use it because it messes up the screen capture. Yeah, you need to refresh each time you change tab. So I'm just going to stick on this tab, guys. Sorry about that. I think it happens every time I use ChessBase or another screen. But it's okay. Now, what is Hikaru doing here? He is counter-attacking the d6 pawn. So if Black plays queen takes b5, then knight takes d6. And White is just winning here. So MVL doing a good job resisting. He's got over 10 minutes. He's a little bit tilted here. It seems to me he's tilted. He's got over 10 minutes, which means he's played fast and he hasn't played very well. Not to take anything away from Hikaru, who's played a stellar game. GTXYZ. So we'll keep an eye on that game as we check back into Giri Carlsen, which, despite being a Berlin, is heating up. Man. This game is heating up, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in the Berlin, it's very important to understand that Black's king, I know that's a banal statement, but Black's king has moved. So if you guys are, why can't Black just castle here? He can't move his king. He's already moved it by capturing White's queen. Which means that, strictly speaking, Black's king is in some danger. Carlsen could go c5 to defend. I mean, his pawn is also being attacked here. That has to be understood. So he can go either c5. The other move he could play is c6, right? To defend the pawn on t5. What is the drawback of the move c5? The drawback is that if you look at this pawn on d5 very carefully, this pawn on d5 is going to be weak. Why is that important? Because white could use it as a pawn, no pun intended, no pawn intended. Man, all these puns, these meta pawns, in order to open up the d-file, and he can use the d-file as a vehicle, perhaps as a Ferrari GTXYZ, to get to black's king. Okay, that was a good couple of sentences right there. Yeah. Okay, so black is in some trouble here. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of Magnus's position. I think that he should play c6. I think that he should try to keep this pawn as well protected as possible in order to keep the d-file closed. I think that's the best way for him to hold the balance here. Probably the position is still equal. I'm sure if you turn the computer on, which I never do, by the way, because I despise commentating with computers. I think that's a travesty, and I wouldn't be doing my job as a commentator if I had the eval bar on, because then why would anyone need me? Not that anyone needs me in the first place, but just for those of you who are surprised I don't have the eval bar on, I think, and this is just my opinion, I respect completely people's commentating practices. There's a lot of great commentators out there, and they have different styles of doing it. But for me personally, having the eval bar on or having the computer on, it doesn't make it fun for me. It doesn't make it fun for anybody. Part of the fun is in trying to understand the essence of the position, trying to get deep into the position, trying to explore, understand the mistakes. And when you just have that metallic eval bar on, it somehow kills the intrigue for me personally. And I appreciate that people are on my side here. I really appreciate that. And before the games heat up, as Magnus does in fact play c6, just wanted to say how much I appreciate all of the support in the last months. Today, this morning, we had tons of incredible donations. I'm very happy. We've got over 1,000 viewers. That is a lot more than I expected. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And whether you're in US or in Europe, just wanted to extend my appreciation at you taking time out of your busy mornings or afternoons to watch the commentary. I'm having a great time. And remember, I always welcome any kind of feedback, constructive criticism. If you want to send me a message on Twitch, I do read them. I don't respond to everybody just because I'm flooded with all sorts of communication, but I try to read everybody's opinion. So thank you guys. We are watching the so-called Skilling Open. It is day 2 of the quarterfinals. The players are playing 2 mini matches, and then the winner of that advances to the semifinals. We have 2 more games to go. This ongoing one, and then one final one. So we're going to be following things. Do you have 2 monitors? No. Now that I'm right home, usually in Charlotte, I have 2 monitors. Right now, I have a laptop and then an iPad. So it's the next best thing, but it's not quite the same as 2 monitors. And here we see c3 now by Giri. He's defending his own pawn on c2, advancing it to c3. And after f takes c6, we're probably going to see either knight takes c6 or rook to e1. Maybe he'll try to pick that pawn off with a rook. Although, I don't really know. I think this is going to be a draw. Ladies and gentlemen, breaking news. Anish Giri is about to make a draw. This is a historical event, ladies and gentlemen. Historical. I'm speechless. I'm tongue-tied. So I think after knight f8, white's only attempt at generating some winning chances might be to go after that b-pawn. But, and Aronian made a joke like this, I think. Let me just take a sip of tea. Well, Magnus is definitely under pressure. 100 bits always streams. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to hear that, man. Magnus is definitely under pressure here, no doubt about that, but he has held this together very nicely. I think Giri's going to take on f8. We're going to see a draw in this game, I'm pretty sure. And we're going to see a draw. No, the screen is not frozen, guys. Have you ever had a job outside of chess? No. I considered, well, I applied for a lot of internships, both my sophomore and my junior years of college, and I got rejected from virtually all of them, so... And I'm also in love with chess, so I could not be thinking of doing anything other than what I'm doing right now. Mostly consulting. I applied to a bunch of consulting internships. And not that I deserve to get in, because there's a lot of candidates a lot worthier than I am. So it's fine. I respect that. I did choose to major in history. That's perhaps not the best major to develop career prospects, but No regrets. I'm doing what I love. Do you give private lessons? Yes, that's my main thing. Okay, MVL, back to MVL. Yep, Nakamura has won, as we predicted. Okay, so this was a resounding victory now. Ooh, Hikaru with a nice move. Rook c7, and promoting his pawn, making a second queen, and winning the game is Hikaru Nakamura. He has officially won day 2 of the match against MVL. MVL won yesterday's matchup, so they will go into a Blitz playoff. That'll be a scintillating affair. We will keep an eye on that. MVL is white in their first Blitz game. I believe they played 2 Blitz games. I believe they play 2 Blitz games to decide the match. If somebody could confirm that, I would be very appreciative. Giri just drew with Magnus Carlsen. Yep. So that game is going to move on to game 4, and Giri is going to have to win it. But I don't think that's going to happen, so it looks like Magnus will be advancing. Okay, so we got another one of these Italians. We've seen this structure many times. Here we have a bishop against a knight situation. Now, as I discussed earlier, what's very important in such a position when you have a passed pawn is who's got control of the square in front of the passed pawn. And here, of course, white doesn't really have control because he doesn't have a knight to put on d4. But MVL centralizing his pieces, bringing everything in. Looks like a pretty peaceful position. I think white is slightly better here. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Hikaru could maybe snag the pawn on a2, but MVL could very quickly then start pushing his pawns up to f6, to e6. That kind of stuff could get super nasty. So maybe Hikaru just wants to eliminate the bishop on d3, accept the slightly worse position, try to defend it. And we're going to see. I've got a lot of eyes. Okay. Rook to d2. Yep, that's what Nakamura has done. He's taken the bishop. He's gone queen b6. And, yeah, Nabilon fake here. I guess that was MVL. They just changed it. And what is MVL's idea? He wants to quickly create a passed pawn with f5 and e6. f5 and f6 is also possible to try to weaken black's kingside. So let's see. I'm anticipating the move f5, ladies and gentlemen, by MVL. Hikaru can then try to get his rook to e4 to intercept the coordination between black's pieces. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly who is on top here. I feel like white's the one playing for an advantage. I really have no doubt about that. But in a blitz game, anything can happen at any moment. Here comes f5. No, I didn't catch a mild cold. It's just that I'm talking a lot and I need to catch my breath every couple of moments. Rook to c2 by Hikaru. Going after white's pawns. This makes a lot of sense. Now MVL could consider, I would centralize the queen with queen d4, just defending the pawn. I think it's too early for something like e6. Hikaru's idea is this rook on c2 combines with the other rook. And black, I think, has enough counterplay here to make a draw. f6 by MVL. He's going right after black's king. This is going to get really interesting. How will Hikaru respond to this? He's in some trouble here. He's got to be very careful. Okay. Wesley and Rajabab, by the way. Looks like Wesley is once again pushing for a win. Okay. Yeah, but then black will have some perpetual ideas. Rook takes b2 by Hikaru. FG. I don't actually love MVL giving up this pawn. I don't think that was necessarily obligatory. Rook to d4 comes to mind, but then rook to b4, stopping the rook from getting to g4. Okay. Let's see what MVL does here. My guess is MVL should take on g7, expose black's king, and then maybe go rook to d4. I think white's still calling the shots here, but Hikaru is so confident in these positions. He sees everything in these types of positions, and MVL dipping on the clock. Yeah, so we'll see how he does. Nepo game is crazy, apparently. Let me see. Yeah, Nepo game is absolutely wild. I don't know what's going on here. Aronian and Nepo, Jesus. Total madness here in the board between Aronian and Nepo. MVL has gone queen to f3. So he's going to g4. He's going after some lobster pincer mate ideas. Very interesting. I'm not sure it's good, though. In fact, I think it might not be good. Because, well, the idea is if rook takes a2, right? Let's say Hikaru takes. Then queen to g4, g6, and boom, e6, right? Crunching through black's defenses. But what can Hikaru do? Hikaru can maybe go rook to e8. That's what I'm thinking. Queen g4, whoops, sorry. Queen g4, g6. And if you go e6 now, then black has enough defenses on that square to be able to ward off white's initiative. White ends up a million pawns down. So I'm not sure if I like the move queen f3. I feel like MVL might be letting this out of his control. But goodness me, Aronian and Nepo is just absolute madness. Again, we'll keep an eye on that, but that's not the important game right now. We got to keep an eye on the important games. Hikaru is settling into a deep think. He's now below 3.5 minutes. He's lower on time than MVL. That could become significant. Of course, this is the Blitz playoff. The best of 2 advances to the semifinals. Queen to c5 is interesting, suggested by Demon to tie down white's queen to the pawn. But remember, white also has access to that d-pawn. Hikaru has, of course, found the move rook to e8. I'm pretty sure this is what MVL had missed. And now, if anyone's in trouble, it might be MVL. We'll see. Rook to d5, maybe. Not, again, it's a crazy position. It's anybody's game. I would take on d5 if I were MVL, trying to open up another front. We'll see. No, I don't think that Hikaru is worse at all, actually. So let's turn on Magnus's game also. Giri against Magnus. Oh, Magnus is still playing game 3, isn't he? Let me see. Did it get interesting? Giri Carlsen game 1. Sorry, 1 sec. I'm just trying to find it. There's so many things here. Ooh, Giri. No, it's a draw, I think, yeah? This is a draw. So I can at least try to maintain order. F takes g7 by MVL. Cutting into black's king position. He's decided to take on g7. What if Hikaru just takes on a2? I'm not sure what MVL has in mind here. I think Hikaru can just take on a2. Okay. I'm not, again, just not sure what MVL is doing here. Giri Carlsen has officially ended in a draw. Okay. So, MVL and Hikaru, 2 minutes each. MVL defending the e5 pawn. He's going to go after no, but this is anybody's game. This is going to get wild, ladies and gentlemen. Seatbelts fastened and mandatory. Best of 2. They're playing Blitz to decide the outcome of the match. MVL with the white pieces. He cannot afford to lose this game. If he loses this game with the white pieces, well, winning against Hikaru with black on demand is all but impossible. Okay, now Hikaru going rook c2. He's deploying the rook either to c4 or to c1. Every trade is good for black here, obviously, because black's king is the one that's under fire. MVL has let this go completely. He had a great position, but I think he was a little bit overzealous in how he approached the attack. Easy for me to say. He's the one playing under the lights and in pressure. This is very, very complicated nonetheless. Also, let's not forget, Hikaru is the one who holds the connected password. So any transition to an endgame would be most probably disastrous for white. Rook f4 could be a move. Yeah, you could go after the pawn. You could go rook to e3, maybe to stop black's rook or queen from getting to c3. That's another nasty little square, which could force a queen trade. And indeed, MVL has gone rook to e3 as we predicted, but he's below 1.5 minutes. Hikaru below 2 minutes. Will Hikaru just go, Will Hikaru just go a4 and start pushing his pawns? That seems like a very viable strategy. I'm not sure where MVL's attack is going to come from, because if you move the rook to f4, what you might also allow is the move to d4, forcing the queen trade. Rook to c4, rook takes d5, grabbing the pawn, and here comes Hikaru's pawn with a4. Okay, what's the pawn count? The pawn count currently is actually equal, believe it or not. Huh. Now, what should MVL do in this position? One crazy idea would be to go king to h2, just getting the king out of the line of fire. He's done it! King to h2, not so crazy after all. My idea was something like this. Queen to f6, sacrificing the rook, trying to go around to h8 and deliver checkmate. This move would not have been possible with the king on g1, because there would have been the checkmate. b5, that's what's happened. Will MVL go queen f6? I came up with this idea thinking it would never happen on the board. It's happening right now. Will MVL go queen f6? Is this a very strong move, or is this just something crazy? If you take the queen, then I play e takes f6. Thank you, Solar Paid. And then you cement the pawn on g7. If rook takes e3, rook d8 is going to be checkmate. MVL has... I can't believe it. This actually happened. I can't believe this actually just happened. Wow. Okay. Now what will Hikaru do? Again, the idea, ladies and gentlemen, if he takes the rook, then queen takes h6. Mate on h8 seems all but unstoppable. Maybe f6, but I really don't believe this. Check on e6 at the very least. This, why was king h2 necessary? Imagine if the king were on g1. Hikaru would have a check on c1, followed by checkmate on h6. I think Hikaru's missed this. He's below a minute. What will he do? What is the defense? If he ignores white entirely, then rook d6 shuts the queen, and queen takes h6 to follow. This is really, really interesting. A beautiful concept by MVL here. Under a minute on his clock. Hikaru dipping below. He's got 40 seconds. He's got to find something. What is there in this position? I'm not looking at the eval. This is incredible stuff. What to do? What to do? Is black winning? Is white winning? It could be anybody's game here. Rook to c1, some people are indicating. Hikaru's done it. But what if e6 in this position? Looks like black is winning. No, but now queen takes c6 at the very least, and rook takes b5 is at least going to be a draw. And MVL has gone rook to f3. Whoa! What is this? Rook to f3. Queen to d5. Queen h6. f5 maybe is going to happen. This is absolute pandemonium. It's anybody's game. 20 seconds for Hikaru. What to do in this position? Ladies and gentlemen, seatbelts fastened and mandatory. Hikaru with rook h1 check. He's forcing the king onto a square where the queen could deliver check on f3. What an idea. And Hikaru is winning, I think. Because if queen h6, then queen f3, and then white just doesn't have enough firepower here after f5. Although I don't know. King h1, f6. Queen h8 and queen takes e8 is going to happen, followed by a promotion. But Hikaru's probably winning here. e6 by MVL. No. I think white's winning now. Oh my goodness. Oh my lands. e7. MVL's going to win. e7 and MVL's going to win. Queen to d1 is impossible. What a turnaround. What a finish. We'll take a look at this. And MVL has won the first game against Hikaru. What an incredible finale. Because there's no stopping the pawn. Incredible finale in this game. e6 was the move overlooked by Hikaru. And he should have gone... What should he have done? He's already losing here. Queen takes h6 and he's losing. And wow, he should have probably just taken the queen and gone b4, something like this. And it's anybody's game. But Hikaru blundering in the end, the move, incredible move e6. An amazing effort by MVL. An amazing effort by MVL. And Hikaru in now a must-win situation with the white pieces in their second Blitz game. And if MVL is able to save it, then he's going to win the match. The counter is still going, but it's a 1-0. This game is over because, well, black can try to push his pawns, but he's going to get checkmated, obviously. And MVL pulls it off. Not easy to win a game like this. Hikaru clearly in good form. He's finding a lot of cool ideas. But so is MVL, as we will monitor their second Blitz game. Let me see.